It's really good to see you because I need some help figuring out what in the world is going on because as you're probably aware, it feels as bad as 2025 was. It feels like America has basically fell off a cliff on
Yeah.
January 1st,
Yeah.
2026.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I actually was out of the country until like Friday night, the 2nd of
No,
January.
me too.
Right. And the third, what was the third? That was, the morning when there was the invasion and attack of Venezuela.
Yep.
And then that appalling, insane press conference where we learned, ostensibly what had happened and that Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth were now running Venezuela. Of course, later only to find that Donald was in fact the acting president of Venezuela. I mean, and it feels like since that Saturday, it's just been nonstop. Um,
Yeah, it has. Well, it feels that way because it has.
yeah,
So I have, you're a journalist, and I am, like many people, have been deeply concerned with the failures, especially of corporate media,
mm,
to keep the American people informed and basically lay out the facts instead of pretending that both sides have an equal um, are equally truthful or equal in any way, because
yeah.
I think that is clearly not at all true anymore. Do you see any shifts? Like every once in a while, the New York Times has put out a couple of great pieces on the extent to which Donald and his useless family is enriching themselves through the presidency, et cetera, et cetera. But it feels like we're such at such a crossroads here.
Yeah.
I want to get a sense from you if you feel like media in general is keeping up and is actually presenting the reality on the ground that we are in an extraordinarily dangerous place that
Yeah.
seems to get more dangerous by the day.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that, the New York Times has suddenly, kind of,
Mhm.
found the right course, or for that matter, the Washington Post. You know,
Yeah.
both of those have obviously been part of the problem in their inability to name reality, and it's obviously a lot of what's gotten us here. And obviously, you add into that picture, CBS News, the fabled, Tiffany Network, the place of Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow, and all the sort of talented journalists over the years, including a lot of them at 60 Minutes. And we've seen the downward spiral of that, with the arrival of Bari Weiss. And the problem in all of that is that it's exactly playing out this sort of old idea that you show both sides. You give the platform to the Trump regime, and that's somehow going to make the story more full and truthful. And exactly as you said, that's a deep failure at a time when there's right and there's wrong and there's true and there's false. And look, I mean, I think there are certain sort of legacy media that I look to. The Guardian. I think the BBC does good work. I think ProPublica
Yeah.
does work. Those are three quick examples. And from time to time, there's solid reporting at a place like the New York Times. But it's interesting if you take sort of what's happening in Minnesota. I mean, there is national coverage and there's solid reporting, but I find that it's just as useful, maybe more important, to look at something like the Minneapolis Star Tribune.
Yes.
That if you want to know what's happening around the country, when it was Chicago, look at the Chicago Sun-Times that was, for example, doing particularly good coverage. So I think with a lot of these events, I think it's really important for people to make a point of reaching out to check what's being said on the ground locally by the reporters who are closest to what's happening, and often provide sort of the best detail about the specific events, the specific facts. But I think if you were talking sort of more broadly about the state of the media. I mean, look, we are in a point where the independent media has become more and more critical, and it's because people like you and me and a lot of others have sort of said, you know what, we're going to call fascism fascism. We're going to say things as accurately as we can, and we're going to say things like there is a narcissistic malignancy here, and this is what it looks like, and these are the conditions around sociopathy, and these are the ways of understanding things that gets into realms that I think a lot of the legacy media has refused or failed to do.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of great points that I wanted to dig into a little bit more before we shift gears to the world stage, which is sadly something that we need to be grappling with.
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
I'm weirdly optimistic about that, if I can just, foreshadow that part of our chat.
Good, because
Yeah.
we we really need to have something to cling on to. By the way, just a clarification: Donald is my uncle. So, yeah, he's not my cousin or my brother. Give me a break. Come on. Anyway, do
Uh,
not want to be
which
that closely
provides you
related to.
particular insight, and that's really part of it. Besides your education and your training and your knowledge and your deep exploration, you have
That's
an intuitive understanding, and
that's
we
very kind of you, but I was actually just specifying for reasons of vanity. I just wanted to make sure people that I'm not in the same generation.
very true.
Much more importantly, you I want to talk a little bit about the necessity of local media and again your perspective as a journalist and how what a contributing factor it has been to where we are now. We're essentially beholden to these massive corporate media monoliths because local reporting, local media has been decimated, and the importance of local media has been underscored, especially as you're mentioning the most recent incident, Minneapolis, because the reporting on the ground there has been excellent and it
Yeah.
allows people to see in a way they would not.
Yeah.
It's sort of like outlets like the Times and others. They don't have bureaus in other countries anymore, so it really skews things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of as you put it, the decimation of local newspapers is a tragedy. It's a tragedy sort of in history because journalism is, as Jefferson talked about, the fourth estate, and it really does provide. Uh, Goodness knows when we need a guardrail, it provides another guardrail to provide a point of view and a light to what the truth is, and by the way, skepticism and the willingness to use facts to speak truth to power. And if there's not credible and real journalistic organizations, newspapers or otherwise, in all these local communities, it not only allows sort of ICE to come in and do what they're doing, but it allows MAGA politicians and a lot of others to roam free without having the kind of pushback that the exposure of good local journalism provides.
Yeah, and I again, as a counterbalance to what we're facing at the level of corporate media and the fact that the FCC is a wholly owned entity of Donald Trump. It's
Yeah.
stuffed with sycophants who will do his bidding. Are you surprised at the extent to which massive corporate media outlets like Paramount Plus, et cetera, have gone you know, all in with the fascism and the, um, you know, basically betrayal of journalism in service to the bottom line? And do you think there's anything we can do to put the brakes on it?
Mm. Well, look, I mean, Jeff Bezos was one of those people who was standing behind, Donald when there was the inauguration, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
really need a more
yeah,
specific example of, one of the richest men in the world, who was, more than happy to show that he was there backing him, literally. Uh,
yeah,
and so, if you look at, what used to be a really important opinion page, opinion coverage, from the Washington Post. I mean, it's become oftentimes laughable because it goes out of its way to kowtow to the interests of the regime, and this was a an organization, an institution, a newspaper that you could count on providing serious, important coverage. And so, whether it's Bezos, or whether it's the Ellisons who now own sort of CBS News, and who are thinking about a lot of things that are beyond the responsibility of journalism to a democracy, who are busy thinking about their, responsibility to their shareholders and to their desire to be able to make sure that their other media deals go through. And so, between the FCC and their concerns about whether or not they get the backing from the Trump government to proceed with their sales, with their mega mergers, what gets lost in that? Well, it's the truth that gets lost, and this is again, this is where the work of independent media becomes just so critical.
Yeah, and I have one more quick question before we pivot to the insanity that's happening on the world stage. But before we go there, first, I just want to apologize to everybody because I rarely schedules. Actually, I never scheduled a Substack live, so I scheduled like two of them, and then couldn't figure out how to access them. So I think we have three lives going right now. Who knows? But
More
thank
the
you.
merrier.
The more the merrier, right? But thank you to everybody who's here. And just a reminder that Stephen's Substack is truly an essential read. Go subscribe to it. It's called America, America, and I read every post because, well, I'll explain why in more detail later. But getting back to quickly to the problematic situation with corporate media, it's sort of what's happening, particularly at Paramount slash CBS, is sort of emblematic, I think, of what the Trump regime has been doing since 2016. Sorry, 2017. It's not enough that they're winning; they have to shove it in our faces. So, for example, Donald got another Supreme Court seat to fill. And it could have been any right wing hack that would have done his bidding. But no, it had to be the worst person on the planet, Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Right. So just like CBS could have hired some journalistic hack who was actually relatively knowledgeable about being an editor in chief. But no, they have to get the execrable, incompetent, unqualified Bari Weiss. I mean, does this feel like it's part of the strategy just to demoralize us?
Well, look, I mean, I think you have to also look at somebody like Brendan Carr, who's the chief of the FCC, the Federal
Yeah,
Communications
yeah.
Commission, and he's obviously been focused on serving the interests of the president, and that means coercing media entities, whether it's Jimmy Kimmel or whether it's Seth Meyers or whether it's others, sort of looking at for ways to intimidate and cause fear and try to essentially get them to fall in line. And
Mhm.
I mean, this is part of, as it's been a decade long effort to push this agenda, this idea of the media is fake, news is fake, you can't trust anything that's said. If you break down people's trust and belief in the reliability of trusted voices or trusted institutions, once you break down that trust, and it was already at a relatively low level, but when you do that, what you're then saying is, well, the only voice you can really rely on is mine. And that's that degradation of trust and degradation of those institutions has been a methodical and compulsive effort that's gone on now for more or less a decade.
Yeah, and I think, we hear people say that we're sleepwalking our way into fascism. And I
Mm.
say, no, we're not. We are being deliberately manipulated into it or tricked into it or what have you. So I think the deck is stacked, and it's as if we're being told repeatedly not to believe our own lying eyes,
Yeah.
which leads us to what was one of probably the most humiliating consequential events in modern American history. I don't like to call it a speech, but Donald's delusional, mendacious, threatening ramblings on the world stage at Davos. So we're looking at the unraveling of the post-World World War II order
Yeah.
at the hands of an American president. So you said that there might be uh, something to hang on to hope for in the midst of what, again, is nothing short of a debacle for the
Yeah.
world and certainly for this country.
I mean, look, it's the responsibility of European leaders to try to cooperate, to try to get
Right.
along, try to work with, what is the most powerful country in the world. But I think what happened in Davos, was a kind of nail in the coffin for a lot of those European leaders. If they were still holding on hope that there was some version of appeasement that was going to get them somewhere, despite the contempt with which they were treated, despite sort of the hostility, the insults, the lies about, their history, lies about Greenland, lies about their involvement, their support of their involvement with in supporting America with NATO and the NATO alliance, all the ways that they heard, lies and insults and threats. And I just think that this was a moment that was a real shift for a lot of people, even if the result was that that Donald then sort of backtracked in terms of the deal with the so-called deal, the concept of a deal for Greenland with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO. But the thing about it is that I'm I'm holding on to, I'm sort of lingering on the remarkable speech of Mark Carney, the
Yeah.
Canadian Prime Minister, and I think he named things. He said things that I think for an awful lot of people, European leaders, and a lot of people who have been holding on to the belief that the international order can in the near term survive this nightmare. And he really, I think, set the course for change. And, I made a point of actually sort of pulling out a few quotes because I think it's worth people hearing.
Hmm.
Haven't been having a chance to listen or to read the whole thing. And, a few notes from him. He called what's happening, quote, a rupture, not a transition, and that the old order is not coming back. We should not mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. The powerful have their power, but we have something too, the capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and this may be the most important thing, to act together.
Yeah, I think that Carney's speech was phenomenal. It was clear-eyed, it was strong, and it drew a line in the sand. And I think that is what has been missing. And if it honestly took Donald's essentially making it clear to the world that the United States is no longer a participant in Western liberal democracy and is going to make common cause with authoritarian regimes like Belarus and all of those other horrible people on the Board of Peace or whatever it's
Yeah.
called, then so be it. Because, Stephen, I think one of the most alarming things for those of us watching
Mm.
has been the repeated attempts at appeasement, which always not just failed, but put us in a worse position and empowered Donald further.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about J.B. Pritzker, who said this is already goes back to the governor of Illinois, going back to February when he made a point of saying, the only way to deal with a bully is a punch in the face.
Right.
He may have been speaking metaphorically, but he was making the point really clearly. And this was in the context of a conversation that he made, saying, "Look, there is a five-alarm fire," and then began to detail, his sort of knowledge about the rise of the Nazis and the necessity of looking things soberly and honestly and not just trying to get along, not just trying to adapt. And this is where we are. and again, I'm grateful for Mark Carney. I think because I think he, I find myself, how can I put it? I mean, I'm rooting against not America, I'm rooting
Mhm.
against Trump's America. And so, just as I look for spotlight, people who are part of the opposition and who are willing to speak out and stand up and speak with a strong and clear voice, I look at, our once steadfast, our historic Democratic allies around the world. And when they speak out, it's so important to hear them. It
Yeah.
surely me, I think it should be a source of uplift for all of this of us who are looking for the point where we get through this and know that there are allies in the world who are hoping that the day will come again when America can be a genuine friend, ally, supporter of democracy around the world. Can I share one other thing from Carney? Because again, it
Yeah.
was good. And this has just been in the last day because, he was Canada was among those that was invited to the so-called Board of Peace.
Well, not
And
for long.
and he was specifically in the last day disinvited because our thin-skinned president obviously knew about the speech,
Mhm.
what he heard from Carney, and in Davos made a point of saying that that Canada only lives because of the United States, right? Which was a incredibly obnoxious, offensive, boorish thing to say. But Carney's response was this: Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. And listen to this: diversity is a strength, not a weakness. And Canada is the greatest country in the world to be a regular person.
Mm.
And you don't need to be rich, have a certain color, or worship a certain God in order to thrive.
Wow. Yeah. First of all, there are a lot of Canadians here today. So, one, we're
Thank
sorry.
you.
Um, and two, you got you have the right man in charge. And as always, elbows up, Canada. And thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, and please know there are many millions of us, maybe beyond 77 million, who voted
Yeah.
who are as horrified as you are about the trajectory we're on right now. But
Yeah.
I think it's so important to look at those examples of people speaking out, who are looking squarely at what's happening and are naming reality, are telling the truth, and are not going to do it. There are great consequences to the things that Mark Carney is saying. Surely, in terms of trade relations, all of that, but it's exactly saying we're not going to be beholden. We're not going to be held hostage by a madman.
Yeah, and I think, one of the reasons what's happening now is so consequential and will hopefully get more Americans to sit up and pay attention is because Europeans aren't just looking at Donald as the problem. They're looking at an American government that is continuing to enable him and back him and tens of millions of people in the American electorate who put people like him, continue to put people like him back in power. And I think that should be an invitation for those of us who agree with Mark Carney to step up and remind the world that, as you said, there are tens of millions of us in this country who are on the right side of history. So, do you think that that was also one of the good things about this? That it is definitely a call to action.
It is a call to action, and I think, look, on the domestic front, let's sort of, give praise to our, friends in Minnesota, right? Our friends in Minneapolis who, maybe are the first. Well, there was Chicago before this, there was LA before that. There's been a number of cases, but given sort of the incredible intensity and extreme kind of brutality of what's been happening in Minneapolis, I know. I mean, it's clear that Minnesotans have said that they've had enough. And, today, this is a day right around now where they're having a general strike as an expression that, this idiocy, this nonsense, this violence, this abuse, this lawlessness has to stop. And I hope that it again, this is let's be optimistic that what they're doing in Minnesota becomes something that then spreads around the country, because I do think there need to be other efforts that are made to express the national revulsion and opposition to the regime.
And I think based on what we're seeing, the regime will provide us with those opportunities because they're not stopping.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what's so, and that's the thing I really wanted to ask you, which is that, I mean, we can talk about sort of the cognitive and the physical decline of Donald, but I'm curious about whether one, do you think it really is accelerating? Is there a way to name where we are in that process? A, and
Hmm.
I mean, is it all surprising that surely this federalized police state that's underway at such an extreme level that seems to be just an extension of the madness of Donald, that there are so many thousands of people who are willing, maybe millions, who are not only willing to see it happen, they're applauding it.
Yeah, I think first of all, yeah, I think that Donald's decline is hastening. It's pretty obvious, and that's how these things typically work. But I don't know that it's going to matter.
Yeah,
I worry about the not just the mechanisms that are put into place, but the people who have been put into place who will continue to do this vile work
yeah,
because I don't know that. So let's say theoretically, Donald decides that he's going to resign, or that's never going to happen, but or that he's just going to go play golf or what have you. Um, that doesn't change the fact that people like Greg Bovino and Kash Patel and Kristi Noem and on and on and on and on, because everyone is worse than the next. That they are in charge. I think Stephen Miller is has more power than almost anybody in the American government, and I think that he is actually running things in a way Donald isn't.
yeah.
So I mean I don't say that to make people feel demoralized. I say we need to be honest about where we are, and things will get worse before they get better, but they will get better because we are living at a crucially important year, and I think there are opportunities. So I wanted to shift gears because I want to wrap up soon, and talk a little bit more about. There's one aspect of your newsletter, which again is America, America. Everybody, please
Right.
go subscribe. That you have a way of your work is shot through with hope and and underscoring the necessity of for connection in these times. How do you hang on to that? Because it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes it's harder than other times, there are days, I mean, I'll write about something and I know it's dark and I know that it's, demoralizing, and I know people feel overwhelmed often, they feel despair, I'm conscious that, people are always sort of, one story away from giving up because they don't feel, empowered in any way, and so I've felt like the responsibility is to spotlight good people who are doing good things, to spotlight, wise words, from people who are opposing and are looking squarely at what's happening. I find nourishment in that. I find uplift in that. And I mean, I've been encouraged by readers, particularly to make a point of sort of looking at what can you do, and so it's not always. If I used to think sort of journalistically, the job is to kind of document and diagnose. Those things are important, but I think it's document, diagnose, and give people some sort of sense of what can you do. And so I'm always, even if it's just hold on to the truth and to speak out and to tell the truth as much as you can, and to remain clear. And this for me is the fundamental thing is that we are going to get through this. I remain convinced of that. I think the idea of democracy, 250th anniversary of the founding of the country. I think the history of the country has been a lot of, very terrible periods, whether it was the bloody Civil War or whether it was during the Civil Rights era or whether it was, periods of the Revolutionary War that, things looked quite bleak, whether it was the Reconstruction after
Mhm.
the Civil War when, where there was an incredible amount of violence that led to the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and, so on
Mhm.
and so forth. I
Yeah.
mean, we have had many periods in our history where, Americans have stuck with it, have stuck with the idea, and under conditions as bad or far worse than what we're living through now. And so
Mhm.
the idea of America, I think, continues, at least for me, it continues to be a source of nourishment. And I hope it can be for others, especially this year, where we have a chance, this generation, this moment, we have a chance to actually be, the voices that say we helped to save the republic.
Yeah.
And, at other times that might seem hyperbolic. It doesn't seem that way now.
No, not at all. And I think if um it is one, as you say, so important to remember how much darker things have been in American history. And I'm not saying that means that things are okay now. They're not. They're terrible, and we are on a precipice, truly. But I say that as do you to remind people that we have been through worse, but also as a way to motivate people to stay in the fight because it's clearly one worth fighting and it's one we can win. And maybe more importantly, I think it's incredibly important for Americans to be reminded or to be taught that democracy is a process. It's
Yeah.
not an endpoint, and it's something we always need to be working for, to strengthen, to expand, and it's never, ever something we should take for granted, and I think one of the reasons here is because we have. So,
Yeah, and one other point I wanna make just really quickly is that, the other part of this is about community, and, if you feel alone, if you feel disconnected, if you feel disengaged, if you feel like, you see these sort of dark forces and you don't feel the solidarity of being with others, whether that's in reality and physical, proximity or whether it's in virtual communities, and so one of the things that I take strength from is that the community of America, and I know that there are others, but the community of people, it's meaningful and it's built over time, but it's become, genuinely, it's a genuinely a thing and where
yeah,
I mean, I see it in the comment sections and I see sort of people reaching out, that people care, people are thoughtful, people, want things to go better and it helps to be able to connect with and communicate with a community of others. So, if people are feeling disconnected and I try to be sensitive to that with readers, it's so important to be a part of a community, whether it's
yeah,
American or whether it's sort of, your community, Mary, or whether it's, some other, organization that, helps sort of the advocate for immigrants or, whatever it may be. It's so important to feel connected like that and to do what you can to help because it's not only good for others, it helps you, get through this period.
I think that is an excellent point to end on. To everybody who stopped by and hung out with us, thank you so much. Again, Stephen's Substack is called America America. Go subscribe. Mine is The Good in Us, and they are truly wonderful communities to join. So
Please,
please go check them out. And Stephen, it's always a pleasure. It's great to see you. And
likewise.
hang in there. And
You you
hopefully we'll do this again soon.
thank you, with pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye, everybody.